The dinner had started normally enough. We were sitting around our usual spots at the mahogany dining table, the same one we'd eaten at for the past 8 years since we'd moved to this house. Mom had made her famous pot roast, the one she always prepared when she wanted to have a serious family discussion. I should have known something was coming. But then my phone buzzed. I glanced down, expecting maybe a text from a friend or some random notification. Instead, I saw a message from a number I'd never seen before. The words on that screen made my blood run cold. "Get up and leave. Don't say anything to your parents." I stared at this text, my heart starting to race, when another message came through immediately. "Trust me. Your life depends on it." Now, if you're enjoying this story so far, make sure to subscribe, because what happened next blew my mind, and you won't want to miss how this insane night unfolded. I sat there, phone in my trembling hands, while my parents continued going on, completely oblivious to what I was reading. They had no idea that someone had just told me my life was in danger. Who was this person? How did they get my number? And why were they telling me to run from my own parents? But here's the thing that terrifies me even now. Something deep in my gut told me to listen. Without saying a single word, I stood up from that table, grabbed my coat from the back of my chair, and started walking toward the front door. My parents went from angry to completely confused in about 2 seconds. "Sandra, get back here. What is wrong with you?" My mom screamed behind me. But I didn't turn around. I didn't explain. I just walked out of that house, got in my car, and drove away, having no idea that this decision would reveal a truth so horrifying about my family that it would destroy everything I thought I knew about my entire life. Here's what I need to know from you right now. If you had gotten a text like that during a family dinner, would you have trusted it and left? Or would you have stayed and demanded answers? Let me know in the comments. Because what I discovered next proved that sometimes the most dangerous people are the ones who claim to love you most. So there I sat, in my car in our driveway, hands shaking like crazy, staring at this mysterious text. To understand why this moment was so terrifying, I need to tell you about my life up until that point. Because what I thought was a perfect family was actually built on lies I never could have imagined. My name is Sandra Morgan, and I was 26, had just graduated college 6 months earlier with a 4.0 GPA, and moved back home while I looked for a job. I'd always been what everyone called the perfect daughter. Straight A's my entire life, never got in trouble, never even had detention. I was the kid other parents pointed to and said, "Why can't you be more like Sandra?" But ever since moving back home, something felt wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it, but my parents seemed different, more controlling than I remembered. My dad, Delon, was obsessive about my job search, wanting to approve every application I sent out. My mom, Lisi, would get this weird panicked look whenever I talked about moving to another city for work. Then there were these strange little things that started adding up. I'd find my mail already opened when I got home. My parents somehow knew about conversations I'd had with friends that I never mentioned to them. When I asked my dad about his job in government contracting, he'd get vague and change the subject immediately. My mom, who'd been a housewife my whole life, would get visibly nervous whenever certain topics came up. Anything about family history, our relatives, or why we moved so much when I was younger. And oh God, we did move a lot. By the time I was 18, we'd lived in 7 different states. My parents always had explanations. Dad's job, better schools, fresh starts. But looking back now, every move happened suddenly, like we were running from something. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. Beautiful 4-bedroom house in the suburbs, expensive cars in the driveway. They'd paid for my private school education without blinking. But my parents had this obsession with family loyalty above everything. That was their motto. They drilled it into me since I was little. Family comes first, always, no matter what. What was weird was that we had no extended family. None. My parents claimed they were estranged from their relatives, that there had been some big falling out before I was born. I'd never met a single grandparent, aunt, uncle, or cousin. Not one. When I was younger, I used to ask about it, but my parents would get so upset that I learned to stop bringing it up. All my childhood friends? Gone. Every time we moved, I'd lose touch with everyone. My parents never encouraged me to stay in contact with anyone from our previous cities. They said it was better to focus on the future, not the past. But recently, I'd started noticing inconsistencies in our family photos and stories. There were gaps in our photo albums, like chunks of my early childhood were just missing. And sometimes my parents would tell different versions of the same story about my childhood, little details that didn't match up. So when I got that text telling me to leave, something deep down recognized that all these weird feelings I'd been having might actually mean something. I sat in my car, and my hands were trembling as I texted back, "Who is this?" The response came immediately. "Someone who's been watching your family for months. Check your birth certificate." My birth certificate? What could possibly be wrong with my birth certificate? But something about this person's tone made me take them seriously. I drove to the 24-hour copy center downtown, my heart pounding the entire time. I pulled up the online birth records database, typed in my information, and waited for the results to load. When I saw what came up on that screen, I thought there had to be some mistake. The birth certificate showed a completely different hospital than the one my parents had always told me I was born at. Not just a different hospital, a different state entirely. That's when another text came through. "Your real name isn't Sandra Morgan. It's Evelyn Swan." I literally pulled over on the side of the road because I thought I was going to pass out. Evelyn Swan? That name meant nothing to me, but seeing it written there felt like someone had just told me I was living in someone else's life. I called the number immediately. A woman's voice answered, maybe in her 40s, and she sounded like she'd been crying. "Sandra? Is this really you?" "Who are you?" I whispered. "My name is Maria," she said, "and I'm your biological aunt. Your parents kidnapped you when you were 3 years old." I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so insane. "That's impossible. My parents would never." "Your real parents are my brother Carlos and his wife Ana," Maria interrupted. "They've been searching for you for 23 years. They never stopped looking for their little girl." "You're crazy," I said, but my voice was shaking. "Deland Morgan isn't a government contractor," Maria continued. "He's a professional identity cleaner for criminal organizations. He creates new identities for people who need to disappear. And Sandra? They've been running from the FBI for decades, taking you with them." The world felt like it was spinning. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about my family, about who I was, it was all crashing down with every word this woman spoke. Maria's voice was still echoing in my head when my phone started buzzing with incoming texts. "I'm sending you proof right now," she said. "Look at your phone." The first photo that came through made me drop my phone onto the passenger seat. It was me. Definitely me. But I was maybe 4 years old, sitting on the lap of a woman I'd never seen before in my life. A woman with dark hair and kind eyes who was holding me like I was the most precious thing in the world. There was a man next to us, laughing, with his arm around both of us. They looked happy, like a real family. More photos kept coming. Me as a toddler, blowing out candles on a birthday cake with these same strangers. Me playing in a backyard I didn't recognize. Me being pushed on a swing by a woman who definitely wasn't Lacey. But it was my face in every single photo. I could see my own features, my own smile. "Do you recognize them?" Maria asked gently. I can see that it's me, but I don't remember any of these people," I whispered. "How is that possible?" "Because they used experimental memory suppression therapy on you when you were 4 years old," Maria said, and her voice was filled with rage. "I have the hospital records, Sandra. After they took you, they had a doctor erase your memories of your real family." She texted me more documents, medical records showing treatment for severe trauma and memory loss at a private clinic when I was 4. The dates matched up perfectly with one of our mysterious family moves. "I've been working with FBI agent James Parker for 2 years, Maria continued. "We've been building a case, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to approach you safely. If you're watching this and thinking this sounded too insane to be true, make sure you subscribe, because the evidence I'm about to show you proved that the most unthinkable crimes could be hidden behind the most normal-looking families." As Maria kept talking, something strange started happening in my brain. Memories, or maybe fragments of memories, began surfacing like bubbles rising to the surface of water. I suddenly remembered speaking Spanish as a small child, calling someone Tia. I remembered the panic that would flash across Dylan and Lizzie's faces whenever a police car drove by our house. I remembered being drilled over and over. Never talk to strangers, never give out personal information, never tell anyone about our family. All those moves, all that isolation, the overprotectiveness, it wasn't love. It was fear. They were running and they dragged me along as their cover. Maria, I said, I need more proof. I need to see more. Check your glove compartment, she said. What? I had someone place documents in your car while you were at the copy center. Check your glove compartment. With shaking hands, I opened the glove compartment and found a manila envelope I'd never seen before. Inside were official-looking documents with photos and fingerprints. And there, staring back at me, was my dad's face with a completely different name underneath. Derek Matthews. Wanted for money laundering and child abduction. Child abduction. The words hit me like a physical blow. I drove home in a complete daze, my mind reeling with everything I'd learned. When I walked back into the house, Dylan and Lizzie, my old parents, were waiting in the living room, like they'd been sitting there the entire time I was gone. Where did you go? Lizzie rushed toward me, her eyes red from crying. We were worried sick. You can't just walk out during a family discussion. Dylan's voice was stern, but I could see something else in his eyes now. Fear. I looked at these two people who had raised me, who I'd called Mom and Dad for 23 years, and I took a deep breath. Tell me about Carlos and Anna Swan. The change in their faces was instant and terrifying. They both froze like someone had pressed a pause button. Dylan's face went completely white, and Lizzie's hand flew to her mouth. Where did you hear those names? Dylan's voice was barely a whisper. Lizzie started crying again, but these weren't the manipulative tears from dinner. These were tears of pure terror. Oh God, she sobbed. They found us. Who found you? I demanded, even though I already knew the answer. Dylan started pacing, running his hands through his hair. Sandra, listen to me very carefully. Those people, Carlos and Anna, they're dangerous. We took you away from them to protect you. You took me? The words came out sharper than I intended. Carlos was involved with drug cartels, Dylan continued desperately. Anna was mentally unstable, couldn't take care of you properly. We saved you from that life. So you kidnapped me and erased my memory? I said it flat out, watching their faces. Lizzie broke down completely. We loved you. We gave you everything. We've been the best parents we could be. But Dylan's response was different. His fear was turning into something else, something aggressive and controlling that I'd never seen before. We're leaving, he said suddenly. Tonight, go pack your bags, we're getting out of here. I'm not going anywhere with you, I said. His eyes turned cold. You don't have a choice, Sandra. You're still our daughter legally. And if you think those people who contacted you actually care about you, you're more naive than I thought. Here's what I wanted to know from you. If you had discovered your entire life was built on a lie, but the people who lied to you genuinely believed they were protecting you, how would you have handled that situation? Because what happened next tested everything I thought I knew about right and wrong. The standoff in our living room lasted maybe 30 seconds before everything exploded into chaos. That's when we heard them. Sirens wailing in the distance, getting closer and closer. Dylan's head snapped toward the window as flashing red and blue lights started strobing through our curtains, painting our living room like some kind of nightmare disco. No, 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 Dylan was muttering, rushing to the window and peering through the blinds. How did they find us so fast? Then came the voice that made my blood freeze. A man with a bullhorn outside our house, his words echoing through the neighborhood. This is the FBI, Derek Matthews, Lizzie Matthews, exit with your hands visible. Derek Matthews. They'd called him Derek Matthews, not Dylan Morgan. The name from those documents was real. Dylan spun around and stared at me with a look I'll never forget. Pure betrayal mixed with dawning realization. His eyes dropped to my jacket, and that's when he saw it. The small recording device that Maria had given me was clipped to my collar, its tiny red light blinking. You were wearing a wire, he said, his voice flat and deadly quiet. You recorded everything we just said. Lizzie looked back and forth between us, confused and terrified. What's happening? Sandra, what's going on? But Dylan was already moving. He walked into the kitchen with this eerie calm, opened the drawer next to the stove, and pulled out a gun I never knew he owned. When he came back into the living room, pointing it in my direction, Lizzie screamed. They're not taking you away from us, Dylan shouted, his voice cracking. Not after everything we've done to keep you safe. Dylan, no. Lizzie threw herself between us. She's our baby. She's our little girl. I was trapped in the middle of our living room with the FBI outside demanding surrender and a man I'd called Dad for 23 years pointing a gun at me. The recording device on my collar felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. You don't understand, Dylan was saying, tears streaming down his face. Those people out there, they don't know what Carlos was involved in. They don't know what kind of life you would have had. We saved you, Sandra. We saved you from something terrible. The bullhorn crackled again. Derek, we know Sandra is in there. We know she's safe, but you need to put down your weapon and come out peacefully. That's when something inside me shifted. Looking at this broken man holding a gun, looking at Lizzie sobbing on the floor, I realized something that changed everything. They weren't monsters. They were terrified people who had made a horrible choice 23 years ago and had been running from it ever since. Dad, I said quietly, and his eyes snapped to mine. If you really love me, you'll let me choose my own life. His hand holding the gun started shaking. I'm 26 years old, I continued, taking a small step toward him. I can make my own decisions about who I want in my life. But right now, you're pointing a gun at your daughter. Is that really who you want to be? His voice broke completely. I can't lose you. You're everything to us. You're the only good thing we ever did. Then don't make me afraid of you, I whispered, please. The gun dropped from his hand and clattered onto the hardwood floor. Dylan collapsed onto the couch, put his face in his hands, and started sobbing like a child. We only wanted to protect you, he kept repeating. We only wanted to protect you. Lizzie crawled over to him and wrapped her arms around him, both of them crying so hard they could barely breathe. The front door burst open, and FBI agents flooded into our living room with their weapons drawn. Agent James Parker, a tall man with kind eyes, immediately assessed the situation, saw the gun on the floor, and signaled his team to lower their weapons. Sandra Morgan? He asked gently. Actually, I said, my voice barely a whisper, I think my name is Evelyn Swan. What happened next was like watching my entire world get dismantled piece by piece. They handcuffed Dylan and Lizzie, these people who had raised me, who had loved me in their own twisted way, who had destroyed lives trying to create what they thought was a better one for me. As they led them toward the door, Lizzie turned back to me one last time. I'm sorry, she mouthed. I'm so sorry. I was crying too hard to respond. Agent Parker stayed with me as the house emptied out, as our neighbors gathered on their porches to watch the chaos, as everything I thought I knew about my life officially ended. Your real family has been waiting 23 years to see you, he said softly. They never gave up hope that someday they'd find their little girl. I nodded, but I couldn't speak, because even though I'd learned the truth, even though justice was being served, I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that somewhere in the back of a police car, the only parents I'd ever known were crying just as hard as I was. 3 days later, I found myself sitting in a sterile FBI conference room, staring at a door that would change my life forever. Agent Parker had arranged for me to meet my real parents, Carlos and Anna Swan, the people who had been searching for me for 23 years. When that door opened and I saw them for the first time, it was like looking at a puzzle piece that had been missing my entire life. Carlos had my eyes, the same deep brown that I'd always wondered about since neither Dylan nor Lizzie had them. Anna had my smile, that crooked little grin that photographs never quite captured right. But what broke me completely was watching Anna collapse into sobs the moment she saw me. Evelyn, she whispered, reaching toward my face like she couldn't believe I was real. Our Evelyn. They showed me videos on Carlos's phone, home movies I had no memory of. There I was as a toddler, taking my first steps toward Anna's outstretched arms. There I was at age 3, giggling as Carlos pushed me on a tire swing in their backyard. There I was blowing out candles on a birthday cake, surrounded by people who looked at me like I hung the moon. We never stopped looking for our Evelyn, Anna said, holding my hands like she was afraid I'd disappear again. Not for a single day. Carlos pulled out a worn photo from his wallet. Me at age 3, gap-toothed and grinning. Every birthday, every Christmas, every milestone you should have been there for, we wondered where you were. We set a place at the table for you for 23 years. That's when they told me about my siblings. I had a younger brother, Miguel, who was 21, and a sister, Isabella, who was 19. They'd grown up knowing they had an older sister who was taken from them. They'd helped search for me. They'd never given up hope either. The hardest part was learning that I had to make a choice about who I wanted to be moving forward. Did I want to stay Sandra Morgan, the identity built on lies? Or did I want to reclaim my real name, Evelyn Swan? I chose Evelyn. After 23 years of living someone else's life, I wanted to know who I really was. Agent Parker explained that Dylan and Lacey would face at least 20 years in federal prison for kidnapping, identity fraud, and a dozen other charges. 20 years. These people who had raised me, who had loved me in their broken way, would spend the rest of their lives behind bars. And here's what messed me up the most. I felt guilty about it. Despite everything they'd done, despite the lies and the stolen memories and the destroyed lives, part of me still loved them. They were the only parents I remembered. How do you just turn that off? I started therapy immediately to help recover my suppressed memories and process the trauma. Dr. Martinez explained that it was completely normal to have conflicted feelings about my kidnapper parents. Trauma bonding is real, she said. They weren't just your captors. They were your caregivers. Your feelings are valid, even if the situation wasn't. 6 months later, I was sitting at another dinner table, but this one felt completely different. I was with Carlos, Anna, Miguel, and Isabella, my real family, and for the first time in my life, I understood what belonging actually felt like. They told stories about their childhoods, about traditions I should have been part of, about the life I should have lived. My phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "Welcome home, mija. Your real life is just beginning." She was right. At 26, I was finally starting the life I was meant to live. But if you think that's where this story ended, you're wrong. Because 30 seconds before I was about to turn off the lights and go to bed that night, I found an envelope that had been slipped under my apartment door. Inside was a letter from Lacey, written from her prison cell. "Sandra," it began, "and even in prison, she couldn't call me by my real name. The money we saved for your college fund, $47,000. It's in an account I set up for you. The bank information is in this envelope. Blood doesn't make a family, but I hope you can forgive us someday. We genuinely thought we were saving you from something terrible. I hope your real parents give you the happiness we couldn't." I held this letter, tears streaming down my face, because even after everything, even after the lies, the kidnapping, the stolen life, there was still love there. Twisted, broken, criminal love, but love nonetheless. The truth is, some stories don't have clean endings. Some stories leave you with more questions than answers. But sometimes that's exactly how healing begins. In the messy, complicated space between love and betrayal, between the family you remember and the family you never knew you had, between Sandra Morgan and Evelyn Swan. My real life was just beginning, but it would be built on the ashes of everything I thought I knew. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly how it was supposed to be. If you've made it this far in my story, if you enjoyed this story, like, subscribe, and share with others so they can learn too. See you in our next video.